Hello everyone, I'm back again and this is another audio video. So plagiarism is a bad thing and it has some pretty bad consequences to it too. Most people know it as getting work from another person, then submitting it as your own work, but it's actually a couple other things as well. It can also be when you are paraphrasing or summarizing an author and your paraphrases and summaries are too close to the original work. Let's get into that a little bit more. So let's say that the author came up with a new term, and it was like a cool term or something. Let's say it was like muja, and muja meant really cool, and it was an original word, and you started using it and said that you invented it. So that would be taking language from the author and pretending you invented it. That's plagiarism. Also taking the author's ideas. So if you summarize or paraphrase an author and then forget to do an in-text citation, which we're going to talk more about in a second, then that is also plagiarism. So you're probably thinking to yourself right now, wait a second. So if I forget or if I don't know how to do an in-text citation properly, I'm plagiarizing? Yes. So plagiarism, people often think of as happening on purpose. It actually more commonly happens on accident because of not citing properly in your in-text citation and maybe even your full text citation in the works cited section at the end of the paper. So that's more common, the accidental plagiarist. The on-purpose plagiarist usually is pretty rare because people aren't big liars like that, right? So it also can happen if you think that the author's idea and the conclusion that the author makes is your own. I see this a lot in undergraduate research, again, not on purpose. It's just that you're reading so much and you're absorbing so much, and you come to believe an idea as true. So, for instance, let's say that you were studying the frontal lobe of the brain and you realize that people who lack empathy have had frontal lobe anomalies. And you didn't realize that on your own. You read a ton of papers that show people who lack empathy have frontal lobe, maybe brain injury or misfirings of neurons. And so then you say in your own paper, obviously, people that have frontal lobe anomalies are more likely to have lack of empathy. Well, no, that wasn't your idea. You just read a bunch about it and you didn't cite it. So it's so interesting that this happens a lot. Students often read so much they incorporate the values and beliefs and ideas as their own when they're not their own, and they forget to cite them in their papers. There is an area in which you do not have to cite. Now, that's called common knowledge. When something is common knowledge, like there's a sun in the sky and the sun is made of gas, you do not have to cite that. Maybe in like the 1500s or something, people argued that, and like people literally maybe lost their lives. Actually, they did, right? For thinking that the sun didn't uh, revolve around the earth. The earth revolved around the sun. But since then, we've had tons of research that shows, hey, that's true and that's super true, and we don't need to argue that anymore because it's so true. That's called common knowledge. Now, common knowledge is stuff like, yes, there's a sun and the earth revolves around the sun. So it's really common. Everything else should be cited. If you're unsure, cite it. Citing is better. You don't want to be an accidental plagiarist. So another way to plagiarize something, and this also happens commonly when students write, is they are so nervous about getting the idea of the author wrong. In our last video, you learned that it's easy to not get the main point right because you wanted to say something. And so people who are hyper nervous maybe go the other direction and may just change a few words and not really the sentence structure. Well, if it's too close in sentence structure and you're just changing a few words, or you change the sentence structure only and just flip around the sentence, the predicate and subject, then it's still plagiarism. It's still plagiarism. Also, mirror image, where you're just taking their ideas point by point and changing how it's said, but you're basically saying the same thing, like in order of how they said it. That's also plagiarism. When you're not making it clear where your ideas enter and the other ideas enter, that's also plagiarism, and that's tricky. We're going to learn how to do this. I like to refer to this as the dance, where the author's ideas end and where your ideas begin and their ideas start up again and another person talks. It's like a discussion in a room, but because we cannot see the faces and the people talking, you do this with in-text citations. So it's like a dance. It's really beautiful, actually, when people learn how to do it well. So when that's not clear, when you don't learn how to dance, which you shouldn't know yet, so don't worry, then that's also plagiarism. And then obviously never represent someone's ideas as your own, because they're not, even if you thought of it too, right? It's still someone else did the hard work of doing the study and writing the paper and getting the paper published and stuff. So let's look at some examples of how to cite. Remember I said the biggest way to plagiarize accidentally is to not do your in-text citation properly. Basically, an in-text citation is made up of two things. In both MLA and APA, though those two things are different whether you're using MLA or APA. For these first two more assignments, so Lab 2 and Paper 1, you're going to be using MLA. It's just easier. Let's all use MLA. So in MLA, those two things in an in-text citation are the author's last name and the page number. It's that simple. When there is an idea of another person and you say it in your own words, you don't copy it word for word unless you're quoting, you say it in your own words, and then you cite that author, it's just their last name and their page number. It's as simple as that. And let's say then you actually say their name, like this right here, in the sentence. Then you just need the page number. And I put George Will here, but you could have just said Will as well. You don't have to say their full name, George Will, unless you're introducing them for the very first time in your paper. So basically, those two things, last name, page number, simple. Well, on the web, a lot of times nowadays, there isn't necessarily a page number associated with the work, because if it's on a web page, then maybe it's just an author. Well, in that case, you would count the paragraphs. You would count the paragraphs and you would write PARA. Let's look at an example of this. So if, let's say there's 1,000 paragraphs in something, I don't expect you to do PARA 1,000. Usually the rule is if it's 10 paragraphs or under, use the PARA. So right here, I got this clearly off of the web and there was no page number associated with it. So I used PARA period, lowercase PARA, and then the page number, which is 5. Please note here that this example I'm showing is APA, not MLA. We know this because we see a comma. In MLA, there is no comma. It's just the author's last name and the page number. It's that simple. In APA, it's the author's last name, comma, and the year it was written. So you're asking yourself, why the heck did you use the PARA thing if you're only supposed to put the year that it was written? Well, I wanted to get more specific about the location of this fact within the website I was reading it from. I also cite the year up here. Because I cite it actually in the writing itself, I don't have to cite it in the in-text citation. That goes with both MLA and APA. So if I say the author's last name in the writing itself, I don't have to say it in the in-text citation. If I don't say it, I do. You can choose to drill down and be more specific, like I did here, if it is a quote. Whenever you have a quote in APA, you have to include the page number in which that quote came from. In MLA, you always have to include the page number. In APA, last name, year, page number, or paragraph number. In MLA, last name, page number, or paragraph number. So let's look at another APA example because that might be confusing to you. So here's a straightforward one. Last name and year. Avery, comma, 2010, APA. Let's go back to our MLA example. Will, 92. No